In a world where anything is possible, in a world where the normal and the paranormal reside, Almost Unbelievable brings to you the stories you want to hear, but fear to hear. Join us in the pit. You have joined the Almost Unbelievable podcast with Cats and Ranty. I am Ranty. Are you there, Cats?
I absolutely am here, Ranty. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, and I'm really looking forward to the guests that we've got on today and the story that they've got to tell us. How are you doing, Ranty?
I'm feeling warm. I'm feeling warm in this pit, but it sure is going to get hotter. We have a guest standing by who's going to tell us a poltergeist / shadow demon story that's going to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
Certainly does sound scary, Ranty. But before we start, I do want to point out to anyone who's new to the podcast, if you want to check out the links in the description to this podcast, you'll be able to find all the places in which you can get in touch with us. And we would love to hear from you if you've got a story of your own and you want to come on and share it. But before we get to introducing the guest, Ranty, I want to start with some statistics. What percentage of Americans do you think they've seen a ghost?
70%.
70%, a little higher though, Ranty. The 18% of Americans believe that they've seen a ghost. But interestingly enough, 29% of Americans believe that they've somehow been in contact with the dead without seeing a ghost, for example, through a psychic or a medium or something like that. What about the demographics? Who do you think is more likely to believe they've seen a ghost, a male or a female?
I would say male.
And you would be right. Out of all the people who claim to have seen a ghost, 56% of them were male. So there you go.
Well, that was some interesting statistics there, Cats, and a very interesting statistic about male and female. However, today's guest is a female, and we are joined by Jalon. Jalon, are you there?
Good morning.
Hello, Ray. You have a very interesting tale to tell us. Would you like to take it away?
Sure, no worries. Okay, so this happened, it was probably the beginning of June, the instance that I wanted to share, and that was, it actually happened to my daughter. She's 16. She's coming into our room. It was probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. She was shaking. She crawled into the bed between her dad and I, and we were just like, well, what is going on? And she said, there was something in my room. And I was like, can you, what do you mean? Like, as a human being, like, what is going on? We need to, dad needs to clear the house then. And she was too afraid to tell us, but we were prodding her insistently, and she knew she was not going to get back to sleep. So she decided to tell us. She said that she was in her room. She was asleep, and she woke up. She said, I was able to move. She said, I know it's not sleep paralysis, Mom, because I could move. And I said, okay, well, what? And she said, well, I looked over in the corner of my room, and I saw this black looking almost like a female figure with these black spikes coming off the top of her head and a very long snake-like tongue coming from her mouth, almost hissing at me, as she was saying. And she said, at first I wasn't really afraid, but then she walked toward me and she put her one hand on the top of my jaw and the one on another on the bottom, and she opened my mouth and she tried to climb inside my mouth. The tongue, she said, first tried going down my throat, and she said it was choking her, but it couldn't crawl inside of her. So as it backed away, it left out this horrible, like, shrill sound. She said it was almost like she was cornered in her bed to where she wasn't able to get out of bed, but at this point she had sat up, and it was not letting her get out of her door. And then she said that for some reason it continued backing out of her door. So she ran in a side door. We have a Jack and Jill bathroom, and she was able to escape through the bathroom and come into our room. And she said the eyes were black, but there were definite holes where eyes would belong, but they were just piercing black. Everything about this being was piercing black. And she said she got at first that it wasn't to harm her, until the point where it couldn't crawl down her throat. That's when it got angry at her because it couldn't enter her. And so that was the beginning of a couple of months now worth of just terrifying things that have been happening in the home. The one other instance, well, there's several, but another instance that happened immediately after that, I was in my bathroom. I sing, so I was just recording myself singing, and it was a video the recording, and something flashed in my bathroom, but I could tell it wasn't just a flickering light. It went from my right side to my left side, but I was holding my phone recording, so there was no way something could walk in between my phone and my face. I posted that on a sub, and someone said, hey, you can use this app, slow it down so you can see it. And I slowed it down, and there was literally something walking in front of me. And I typically don't get afraid since I have kind of experienced things my entire life, but this frightened me to no end. And at the end of my video, you can kind of see my face just drops of just panic and fear. And I run out of my bathroom, and I was explaining this to the rest of my family. Of course, my husband, he's a naysayer, and he's just like, oh, come on, that's nothing. And even showing him the video as evidence, he's so much a skeptic of it. But after that, we started hearing our names being called. We had a French exchange student living with us from August of last year until March. And COVID, she had to go back home. But she would hear me calling her name quite often, and I would be outside, or sometimes I wouldn't even be at home. I hear my name called quite a bit, and it sounds like it's coming from my husband. So the last time I've heard it was probably about 2 weeks now, and I went out to the living room. My family was out there watching TV, and I said, what do you want? Why are you calling me over and over again? I said, I will be out in a second. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I told him, I'm like, you keep calling my name. And he's just like, I have not said your name once. We were watching a movie. So, it's so strange that sometimes my nephew, my daughter, and I can hear them or see them, and then sometimes it's just pinpointed towards one time or one person. We decided to download this a recorder where it just picks up these random words that you can ask the room or whatever a certain question, and it could pop up these words. And this was right before I went and visited my daughter towards the end of June, and it was maybe 2 or 3 days beforehand, and this recorder popped up the word plane, uncle, death, and I deleted it. I was like, nope, I don't even want to get on the plane right now. I am petrified. But I did, and I got up to where my daughter lives in the States. And while I was up there, my uncle suddenly died. He was 60 years old. So it was just complete shock to the entire family. He was totally fine, and he died. And so when I got back down, I live in Florida here, and I got back down to Florida, and I was speaking about this to my daughter and my nephew, and I said, this has to be all in our head. We have to just be going crazy. And in that moment, our entire electricity was shut off. It was down, and we all look at each other, and I was just like, okay, again, could be a coincidence. And then at that point, we heard in our kitchen, it's sounding like very heavy casseroles or pots and pans dropping in the kitchen, as if someone just sat something heavy on top of a pile of dishes. But there were no dishes in the sink. So once we got out to the kitchen and we noticed that, I said, okay, we may not be crazy. This might actually be something targeting us. And in that moment, the electricity comes right back on. We've been experiencing a lot of seeing things out of the corner of our eyes. This just a few days ago, we were sitting in our family room, and if I don't look at it directly, I can fully see something moving peripherally in my vision. And if I turn and I look straight on, it's gone. So I do a really quick turn, trying to catch what it is. And my nephew looked over at me and he goes, "You saw that too?" And I said, "I did." And he said, he did too, but he was too afraid. He's 9. He's like, I can't look towards them. They terrify me. And he said, they've been standing in the hallway outside of my door at night, and I can see the shadow coming underneath the door. And he goes, um, I have to have my door shut so that I can't see any lights or movement in the hallway, because he's at that point where he's just terrified. Um, he has seen things trying to walk into his bedroom at night. And this has been recently, where he hasn't shared a lot in the last, I would say, a couple of months, but he, every once in a while he'll pipe up and say something. And I said to him, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what are you seeing? Whenever he told me that he's been seeing them too. And he said, they'll just stand there and stare at me. And he goes, and all the hairs on my body just stand up. He's like, I can't move. I'm so scared. I can't move. And he said every once in a while he'll spend the night at a friend's house. And he goes, it comes with me there too. So we know that it's not just something that is just in our home. It's somehow something has attached to us. And whether it be that we're sensitive or empaths or whatever you want to call it, we're picking up on something, and now it knows that we can sense it. So it's like it's toying with us. Living here in Florida, we go away quite a bit. We go out to Orlando and Universal or Disney, whatever. And there have been times like I'll stay back because I don't feel like spending 12 hours at a park. And I look over and something just completely moves off the table, falls on the floor. Sometimes it's like my briefcase. It's something very heavy that has my computer, my grade books, everything in it. And it will just slide off the table and fall on the floor, and everything will just completely fall out of my briefcase. I turn over. I try so hard, especially when I'm alone, to think of these logical reasons as to why something happens. Faucets have turned on while we're away. We stay at a pretty nice resort, so they're not old, and no plumbing issues. But the faucets will turn on in the bathroom while I'm alone. My husband's razor will just turn on and it's not plugged in or anything like that. I think he's gone through about 7 different beard trimmers because there always seems to be some faulty thing that's happening with them, and his batteries will just be completely drained. But I keep trying to say, okay, there has to be a logical reason. There has to be a logical reason. But then you get to a point where you're saying to yourself, there is no logical reason. And now I need to figure out how I'm going to protect my family. So we're at that point now where we don't even know what to do. We've had a pastor come out, pray over our house. Things calmed down for about 2 months, but then they're back again. And it seems like at first when things happened, it was a slow progression. But once it was cut off after a pastor came to our home and it started back up with the same amount of momentum as it stopped with whenever he came out and prayed over the house. But now it feels like it's even angrier at us. And we're just seeing what some people call shadow people out of the corner of our eyes constantly, or we get a feeling that we are just being watched. at night, I will wake up to that feeling where you can almost feel somebody standing next to you. Yeah, you just get that feeling. But I do not open my eyes. I started sleeping with earplugs in and a mask over my eyes because I don't want to open up my eyes during the middle of the night. I don't want to hear what's happening around me in the middle of the night because I'm a very light sleeper. And another experience I had was my husband typically doesn't move in the bed. He gets in and he stays in one position and falls asleep uncomfortably because I am such a light sleeper. But one night he was just moving around, and I just didn't roll over, just said, "Can you please stop? You keep waking me up." And it just stopped. And about an hour later, he was doing it again. And finally, I sat up in bed and I turned to him and I was just like, "Okay, this is like the fifth time you've woken me up. Can you please stop moving?" He just looked at me like, "What are you talking about? I'm just now coming to bed." So whatever it was in bed next to me. And it physically felt like a human body with the amount of pressure to push down on the side of the bed and the movement of an adult behind me. I'm not sleeping again. So I've gone back to earplugs, face mask, don't want to even look. When I feel something behind me, whether I'm turned, away from the side toward the center, no matter what, there's this feeling that it's either laying right behind me or it's standing behind me on the side of the bed. And it sometimes wakes you up out of the dead of sleep, just feeling just that eerie feeling that you're having someone standing there watching you. So it has been quite a bit of sleepless nights over the last several weeks, I would say. And we're just lost. We don't know where to go from here. We'd be open to hearing anybody's suggestions.
Well, can I just say that it sounds absolutely terrifying. That made my hair stand up.
What a way to start the show. Now, I don't know chronologically whether this will be the first interview released, but you are the first guest that we have interviewed, and that is one heck of a story to kick off our time in the pit. What do you think, Ranty?
I think it's awesome. Can you give us more details? I mean, you've said that it happens to just some of your family. Do you think that's because some of you are more empathic, or is it something different? Is it just targeting certain people, or is it targeting everyone?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that we're all very sensitive to other people's emotions. So some people will say, "Oh, it's a gift if you can really sense someone's hurt or sadness or whatever." So the only thing that we can think of is that maybe we are just very sensitive, and that since we can sense them or see them, it's like a field day for them, because some of these things that they do are so mischievous, just to mess with somebody, just to incite fear in somebody.
You've obviously lived in the same house for a length of time. Did it start up as soon as you moved in, or has it just started up more recently? Something changed? Something happened? Have you brought something into the house?
My niece was struck, and she said she brought another friend with her, and she kept telling me, "There's something in your bathroom. There's something in your bathroom. I can't take a shower in there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And it's been since then. So I don't know if she brought something along with her. She goes, "I don't know. It just gives me for her he may be along with me." This is what she said. And she actually left early. She was supposed to be with us for 2 weeks, and she left about 10 days. That's around the time that it all started. We've lived in that house since 2010. So it's been going up, but nothing in this house.
And have you ever thought about installing cameras in rooms when these strange things happen, and having a look at the footage, a bit like your paranormal activity? Is that something you've ever thought of doing?
Yes, there's a sleep recorder that I actually downloaded on my phone. And I was picking up quite a bit unknowns of not movement per se, of sleep movements. It will tell you, you know, if a certain noise in the background was you moving in bed, or, was your husband snoring or whatever like that. It does tell you that. And I was picking up quite a bit unknowns that it was just a very quick sound, um, from maybe like across the room, and it would last maybe 9 or 10 seconds, and then it would be, stop just as suddenly as it started. So we would, when I downloaded this, it was, I want to say, at least 5 to 6 times every single night. It had at least that many unknown noises happening in my bedroom. Um, so at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't even want to know. I honestly don't even want to see it, hear it. Uh, I don't. It's just such a scary thing to actually, if you see something, you can admit that yes, it's actually there, rather than hearing something or seeing something out of the corner of your eye. You can logic that stuff away.
Well, can I ask a question? If you do get to the bottom of what's going on, would you be happy to come back into the pit and let us all know what you find out?
Absolutely, that would be great. I would love to share with, the conclusion on what actually happened. If we find out what it is, I would definitely share that, because I know that I'm not the only person that experiences things like this. And I'm a very sane person. So I'm sure other people, if they're the only ones being targeted, they're probably feeling like they're going crazy too. And I don't want someone else to feel like they're alone.
And you did mention that you took some photography. You were filming in the bathroom at the same time as an entity walked in front of you. Do you still have that video? Do you still have that imagery?
I
Would you be
do.
able to send it in to us?
I sure will.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
That is really cool. I'm sure that the listeners will like to see that. I mean, I'm desperate to have a look at it now that you've told me that. Oh, well, I don't know actually. I'm kind of 50-50. Do I want to look at it or not?
Oh, tremendous. Tremendous. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for that. It's been a fantastic story. I'd love to hear the conclusion. Love to get you back on for that. I really, really would. Thank you so much for your time. Ranty, is there anything else you want to ask before we leave the pit?
Well, whenever we get any other guests in that have a similar story, perhaps if you're not averse to us keeping in contact with one another, we can maybe pass you on to somebody else to share their stories and maybe connect with them that way. There'll be something you'd be interested in, or do you just share your story?
You do need people standing beside you, listening to you, at least just being a soundboard to, describe what's going on, or to just be there to support you in any fashion that you can be.
Well, if we can be instrumental in helping you out, we definitely will be. Oh, that's giving me shivers. It's the things with these poltergeists, I mean, you just don't know. You just mess around with those things, and yeah, I had one when I was younger, so I might tell that story one time.
Well, you have to share it with me then too.
Well, my uncle Clifton brought home was it? No. My father brought home a totem pole that was carved in an African carving with faces on, and he left it upstairs into my mother and father's bedroom. And it was only in the house for about a month, 6 weeks maybe. Me and my sister were quite young. We were about 6 or 7. And every time they left the house to go to the shops or disappear for a few minutes, these drums would start playing in the bedroom, and we'd hear these very loud drum noises. And one time I took the courage to go and have a look. So I started climbing up the stairs, and the noises were getting louder and louder and louder. And when I turned the corner to see my mother's bedroom door, the door was almost being pulled off its hinges with the noise of this drum. Oh, and I ran downstairs with my sister. We locked ourselves in. We were terrified. And every time that my mother came back home and let herself in with a key, as soon as she put the key in, the drums stopped. So we told my mother this. She got rid of it. She gave it to my uncle Clifton, this totem pole. He was in love with it. So he took it home. And unfortunately, 2 weeks later, he died in a car accident along with his best friend.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
You know, that could have been a story all of its own. That one, Ranty. Could have saved that one.
exactly.
Right.
Oh, that was a terrifying one.
Wow. Wow.
So, Jalon, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. For me personally, I really, really enjoyed it. What about you, Kaz?
It's been fantastic to listen to, and I just want to thank you for giving up your time. We'll say goodbye to you now, though, and me and Ranty will have a little bit of a chat about what we've heard, but very much appreciate your time, and good luck with everything in the future.
Okay.
Good luck, Jalon, and I'll speak to you later.
That's perfect.
Right, well, what a fascinating story. Now, this is the part of the podcast where myself and Ranty give our opinions on what happened, and we ask ourselves, is that story almost unbelievable? Ranty, what's your take on what we've just heard?
Well, yeah. For me personally, I absolutely believe everything that was told me. Coming from a background myself, where obviously we have experienced quite a lot of poltergeist activity and alike, and supernatural things, everything that she told me, I fully appreciated where she was coming from and fully believed it. The demonic things that happened in the house, the pots, the pans, the laptop, the electrical failing and all that kind of things. And of course the name calling as well. I mean, it's not like it's a wind blowing in the distance where you could mistake the wind for somebody's name. I mean, it's quite clear, you know, when somebody's calling your name, and Jalon was very concise with what she was trying to portray. The shadow demon that attacked her daughter was terrifying, and I have to say, I've seen things too when I was younger, and my sister saw things when she was younger too. And we have stories of seeing things like that. So I absolutely believe that too. Sure, you could argue maybe it was a lucid dream, but for me personally, everything that she said was very consistent. There was nothing that would lead me to believe that what she experienced didn't actually happen. So yeah, for me, what would I do? Well, I would obviously advise her to maybe get another priest in, come back and bless the house. And if that doesn't work, maybe run away. Because I would run away. I would run away. What about
Fantastic.
you, Kat?
For me, well, listen, I honestly 100% believe that everything she's told us, she believes she's witnessed. I think her family believe they've seen everything they've seen. I think her family believe that they've experienced everything that they feel they've experienced. And I believe that those experiences have felt 100% real. My advice to them would be to read a paper called The Ghost in the Machine that came out of Coventry University, written by Vic Tandy and Tony R. Lawrence. Now, the Ghost in the Machine paper draws a link between infrasound, which is any sound of a frequency too low for us to hear, below 20 hertz, and ghost and poltergeist activity. To cut a long story short, if you're exposed to infrasound of a high enough intensity, it will amplify your emotions. So if you're a little bit anxious, which obviously they are, it makes you incredibly anxious and incredibly nervous. But as well as that, it will also affect your vision and your eyes. And I know she was talking a lot about seeing shadow people out the corner of her eyes, etc. Infrasound has been linked to hallucinations. And if you're exposed to infrasound, one of the symptoms of that is seeing things out of the corner of your eye. Now, even more than that, infrasound at high enough intensity is known to cause things to resonate. So objects may start to shake, they may start to move. There's no piano in the house, for example. It may start to sound like somebody's tapping lightly on the keys, etc. So my advice would be to bring somebody in who can have a look at the windows, have a look at the vents. Are there any old fans in the house, for example, that may be emitting some sort of infrasound? And maybe look at it from that perspective. That would be my advice. And then, if that doesn't work, move house.
Well,
at least you're away from the infrasound.
Well, one thing we can definitely agree on, that we can be open, but we can be skeptical.
I agree. So, how are you going to rank this one, Ranty? What should we explain to the listeners? Our 4 criteria that we like to use.
Obviously, the show is almost unbelievable. For me, personally, this was not just almost unbelievable, it was absolutely believable. Of course, there are different things we can talk about. We can talk about unbelievable, or we can talk about almost unbelievable. We can talk about almost believable, or we can talk about just plain believable. And for me, this was plain believable.
Okay, so in my opinion, I think, like I said before, I would say it's totally believable that those experiences have been had. I totally believe that they've had those experiences. When it comes to the cause of those experiences, I'm unfortunately going to say totally unbelievable for me that it's some sort of supernatural or paranormal event. But you don't have to sit on the fence like I've just done. If you want to check out the links in the description of this podcast, you'll find all the places you can contact us on social media. Please get in touch and please let us know what you thought about that story. Also, if you've got a story of your own and you want to share it with us, please feel free to get in touch with us and we would love to have you on the podcast.
Just following on from what Katz has just said, I would say let's see what happens when we have a look at the video from the bathroom when the entity walks in front of Jalon as she's singing a song. Now that might change your mind there, Katz. But for anybody that wants to see that footage, if they want to head on over to Patreon, all Patreons get to see all the footage and all the photographs that are uploaded. We will be releasing them the same day as the podcast. So if you are interested in that, head on over to Almost Unbelievable over on Patreon.
And for now, I've really enjoyed today. I think it's been a great... now, this might not be the first show people are listening to, but this is the first show we've recorded, isn't it, Ranty?
It is, yes.
So I've really enjoyed it, and it's getting quite hot in this pit, so I'm going to climb out and go home. But I will see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.